Hey there, come sit with me near the low fire. Let the room stay dim. Let the candlelight move slowly on the walls. Tonight, I want to tell you a royal story where love and terror share the same breath, where a crown feels less like gold and more like a cold tool held in careful hands, where a woman believes she is saving souls while the city learns to fear her name, where a daughter is praised as a pearl and then erased with ink, where prayers rise like smoke and fall like ash into silence. If you like these long, dark stories that soften as you listen, please tap like and subscribe. It helps this quiet corner reach other night wanderers. And if you feel awake enough, leave a comment with where you are listening from. Now settle back. Loosen your jaw. Let your shoulders drop. Take a slow breath in, then let it out without forcing it. Feel the warmth of the fire touch the front of your face. Feel the cooler air behind you, a gentle contrast, like history itself, bright in one place, shadowed in another. We are going to travel to Tudor England, not the England of postcards, but the England of narrow corridors and thick doors, of chapel hush and political whispers, of wax seals cooling on parchment, of footsteps that sound too loud on stone at night. It begins with a child, a small cry in a palace that smells of polished wood and wool and sweet herbs burned to keep sickness away. Greenwich Palace. The year is 1516, and somewhere beyond the windows the river moves under a gray sky, patient and indifferent. The same river that will keep moving when everyone in this story is gone. Inside, torchlight trembles, and the light makes the gold threads in tapestries flare and then fade, flare and fade. Like a heartbeat you can see, servants move carefully, not rushing, never rushing, because to rush is to draw attention, and attention is a kind of danger in courts. A baby is placed into the arms of Henry VIII, and for a moment, he is simply a father holding something warm and soft. He looks down, and the harshness that will define him later seems far away. He calls the child Mary, and in that instant, she is treasured. She is proof. She is hope, even if it is a hope that the world around him does not quite know how to value. Because in that era, a daughter is not the victory people are trained to want. A daughter is a consolation, a pose, a promise that maybe the next birth will bring a son. And even in the richest rooms, the air carries that quiet disappointment, like a draft you cannot find. Still, Mary grows inside those halls, learning the language of velvet and ceremony, learning to stand still when she wants to run, learning to bow when pride rises in her throat, learning to smile when her stomach tightens. The little lessons of survival that come disguised as manners. If you were standing here with me, you would hear how sound behaves in a palace, how it does not disappear. It lingers. It travels along beams. It slips under doors. It collects in stairwells. A laugh can echo and become a rumor. A cry can echo and become a secret. And a secret can echo until it becomes a sentence written in law. Mary is taught prayers early, not as poetry, but as a rope to hold, beads sliding through small fingers, a rhythm that steadies the mind, candle smoke curling above an altar, wax dripping in slow motion, drop after drop, shrinking the candle, shrinking the night into manageable pieces. Her mother, Catherine of Aragon, is a presence like a steady lamp, firm, devout, careful with affection, not cold, just disciplined, the kind of love that does not need to shout to be real. And Mary learns that love can be quiet and still be strong. Years pass. The palace changes with seasons. Damp winters where the stones seem to drink heat. Summers where curtains barely stir. Always the soft scrape of chairs. Always the rustle of clothing. Always the distant clink of metal as guards shift their weight. And somewhere in those years, Henry changes too. The way a weather front moves in, slowly at first, then suddenly everywhere, he becomes restless. He becomes hungry for certainty, for control, for a story that places him at the center of heaven and earth. His gaze turns from Catherine, and the court feels it before anyone says it. It is like the moment before a storm breaks. Air heavy, people speaking a little softer, servants pausing a little longer in doorways as if listening for thunder. Mary does not understand all of it. Not at first. She only feels the warmth in the room dim. She notices how her father's voice grows sharper, how names are spoken as if they can cut, how Anne Boleyn, a name that begins as a whisper, becomes a presence, then a force. Honestly, I have always found it strange how quickly a child can sense danger without knowing the words for it. You know that feeling when a room looks the same but the atmosphere is different. When the furniture has not moved, but your body still wants to step carefully. Mary begins living inside that feeling. And then, one day, not in a burst of rage, but with the calm of a man who believes paperwork can remake reality, Henry does something that will set the shape of Mary's life, and the shape of the deaths she will later order. But we are not there yet. Not quite. For now, let the image stay simple. A young girl in a corridor lit by candles. The wax smell sweet and faintly smoky. Her shoes soft on rushes laid over stone. Her hand brushing a tapestry as she passes, feeling the raised threads, the tiny stitches, the patient labor of unseen hands. Outside, the river keeps breathing, slow and dark. And inside the palace, the first quiet fractures are forming. Hairline cracks you would miss unless you knew where to look. And Mary, without knowing it, is walking toward them, one careful step at a time. As the night deepens and the fire beside us settles into a steady glow, and the story turns toward the moment when a father decides a daughter can be unmade. In the evenings, when the corridor is quiet, Mary is escorted to lessons. A tutor with ink-stained fingers, a slate that smells faintly of stone dust, a bowl of water for washing hands before touching books, because books are rare and precious, and the people around her treat knowledge like a relic. She learns Latin prayers. She learns how to shape words with the mouth, and also how to hide words behind the teeth. Because in a court, the wrong sentence can travel faster than any messenger. She learns music, the soft pressure of fingers on strings, a sound that fills a room and then vanishes, leaving the listener alone with their own thoughts. Sometimes she goes to the chapel with Catherine, And there is a particular quiet that exists only in places built for prayer. A quiet that is not empty, but full of breath and fabric and the faint creak of wood as people kneel. Candles line the walls, each one a small, steady flame. And if you stare long enough, you start to see that the flame has a rhythm. It leans, it straightens, it leans again, answering tiny currents of air. Mary watches the wax run down the candle in narrow rivers, and she thinks about time without having the words for it. She thinks about how something solid can soften, how something tall can shrink, how a bright thing can quietly spend itself until only a dark wick remains. There are feast days, too, bright with noise, plates clattering, laughter too sharp, musicians playing faster than the heart. But even there, Mary notices the shadows. A servant carries a heavy dish and lowers their eyes. A courtier smiles and does not mean it. Someone whispers near a pillar and then stops when footsteps approach. If you were standing behind the curtain with me, watching, you would see how Mary is always observed, not only as a child, but as a symbol, a possible future, a bargaining piece. Adults speak softly near her, then look at her face to see what she heard. They mention alliances, Spain, Homey, the shape of faith in Europe, and then they change the subject as if the air itself might report them. Mary grows into a young woman with careful posture, the kind that comes from being corrected 1,000 small times. Chin a little higher, hands quiet, eyes lowered at the right moments. She becomes skilled at the smallest performance of calm, yet inside, the mind keeps moving, like the river, like the candle flame, never truly still. Sometimes, late, she stands near a window. The glass is imperfect, a little wavy, and it bends the lights outside into soft halos. She presses her fingertips to the cold pane, and she tries to imagine what her life will be. She cannot picture the burnings. She cannot picture the crowded streets. She cannot picture being called queen. She can only picture her mother nearby, the steady lamp of Catherine, and she clings to that picture as if it could protect them both. The palace smells change as seasons turn. In winter there is damp wool and smoke and the sharpness of vinegar used for cleaning. In summer there is warm stone and cut herbs and the faint animal smell that comes from horses beyond the walls. Always there is the scent of candle wax. Always there is the slight metallic tang of armor in corridors where guards keep watch. And through all of it, Mary keeps learning, without intending to, that power does not announce itself with thunder. It announces itself with small permissions and small denials. The right to enter a room, the right to sit, the right to speak, the right to touch a hand, the right to call someone mother. When Henry's mood turns, it spreads like a stain. Servants begin to place cups a little farther away. Courtiers begin to laugh a little sooner at his jokes. The laughter is a kind of shield. Mary hears it and feels something tighten in her chest, because she understands that laughter can be fear wearing a friendly mask. At night, she lies in bed and listens. The building breathes. A beam settles with a soft crack. A distant door closes. A doll barks once, then goes quiet. Somewhere, a guard coughs. Somewhere, someone prays. Mary tries to make her own breathing slow, to match the steadier sounds, to pretend that if she becomes quiet enough, the world will not notice her. But the world notices her anyway. The world is already deciding what she will be allowed to become. And as the fire beside us lowers into coals, you can feel that decision approaching like footsteps. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady, just certain, coming closer along the stone. There is a particular sound, the sound of a heavy gown moving as she walks, cloth sliding over cloth, a hush like dry leaves, and it follows her through the palace. The child should sound light, yet Mary often sounds weighted, not because she is slow, but because the world has placed meaning on her body. She is the king's daughter. She is the queen's daughter. She is the question of succession made into a person. She attends formal dinners where tables stretch long, covered in linen so white it seems to glow, and candles reflect in polished cups, and the smell of roasted meat mixes with spice and smoke. She watches adults talk while their hands move in practiced shapes, fingers spreading, palms turning up, a performance of honesty. She notices the small pauses when Henry enters, how the room adjusts its breathing to match his. Sometimes Henry looks at her with warmth, and sometimes with distance, as if he is seeing not his daughter but a problem. Mary learns that love from a king can be conditional, and that the conditions can change without warning. In quieter hours, Catherine tells her stories of Spain, of ships, of saints, of endurance, and Mary listens the way thirsty ground listens to rain. The stories do not erase fear. They give it a frame. They say hardship has meaning. Hardship can be carried. Hardship can be turned into prayer. And yet, the palace is full of other stories too. Stories whispered by servants. Stories carried by merchants. Stories brought by ambassadors. Stories about how the world is changing, how churches are argued over, how rulers decide what is true. Mary hears fragments. She does not fully understand, but she feels the tension, a thread pulled tighter across Europe, a thread that will snap in her lifetime. When you lie in bed, half asleep, sometimes you hear the house creak, and your mind fills the dark with shapes. Mary lies in bed like that, and in the dark she imagines doors closing, imagines her mother walking alone, imagines her father turning his face away. The images are not yet facts. They are fears. But fears can prepare the body, can train it, can teach it to wake ready. So the early part of Mary's life is full of soft things. Velvet, wax, prayer, trevor, mist. And yet beneath the softness, a hard lesson is forming. That belonging is fragile, and that the world will call cruelty a necessity when it wears the proper seal. Hold that thought gently. Do not grip it. Just let it rest in your mind like a small stone warmed by your palm, because we are moving closer to the exact moment when that seal is pressed, and the girl who once felt safe in candlelight begins to learn how to live without safety. The day the decree arrives, it does not arrive with shouting. It arrives with ordinary footsteps and a sealed document carried the way you carry anything valuable, close to the body, protected from drafts and curious hands. A clerk reads, a pen scratches, wax warms, and the seal is pressed down. And when the seal lifts away, it leaves a mark that will follow Mary for the rest of her life. She is 17 when her father declares her illegitimate, not as a private cruelty whispered in a hallway, but as a public fact written into the structure of the realm. A sentence that does not describe her, but replaces her. The court repeats it. The priests repeat it. The officials repeat it. And soon it becomes the air she breathes. Imagine what that does to a young mind. How it turns the floor into something unsteady. How it makes every memory feel suspect. As if even the tenderness of childhood must now be questioned. As if the love in Henry's eyes when she was a baby was only a temporary story. A story he can delete. Mary tries to stand straight. She tries to keep her face calm because she has been trained to do that. Trained to carry storms behind her ribs without letting them touch her expression. But the body still reacts. The throat tightens. The hands grow cold. The stomach feels hollow. A private panic that has nowhere to go. There is another cruelty layered into it. The one that lasts longer than any shouted insult. Her mother is banished from court. Catherine is sent away like a piece of furniture that no longer matches the room. And Mary is forbidden from seeing her. Not for a week, not for a season, but for years. The order is simple. No visits, no letters that are not watched, no meetings, no comfort, nothing that might allow mother and daughter to remind each other that they are real. In a palace, distance can be measured in corridors, but separation like this is measured in the mind. It becomes a new geography, a map where the place you need most is marked forbidden. Mary begins to live with a locked door inside her, and every night the door becomes louder. You can almost hear it in the quiet, the click of a key that never turns. The Spanish ambassador, a man trained to watch power the way hunters watch movement, records her sorrow. He writes of her crying at night, of her begging to see Catherine one more time. It is one of the strange mercies of history that even when a girl is powerless, her grief can still be witnessed, can still be written down, so it does not vanish completely. Picture her in a chamber that looks rich and still feels empty. Heavy curtains, a bed that is too large, a small fire that cannot quite warm the corners, candlelight that makes shadows gather in folds of fabric. She sits with her hands folded and unfolds them again, over and over. A small, restless motion, as if the body is trying to undo what the law has done. Sometimes she prays. Sometimes she simply listens to the building, to the settling of timber, the distant cough of a servant, the far bell of a chapel, each sound reminding her that life continues around her, even while the part of life she cares about has been shut away. When you lose someone while they are still alive, The mind does strange things. It tries to keep them present. It rebuilds them from small details. The smell of a familiar cloak, the memory of a hand on your hair, the sound of a voice saying your name. With patience, Mary begins collecting these fragments like small stones in her pocket, weights to keep her from drifting apart. And yet the court keeps moving. Courtiers change their loyalties the way they change gloves, smiling at a new queen, bowing to new rules. And Mary watches, learning something bitter, that in royal life, affection can be seasonal. Her mother's name becomes dangerous to speak in the wrong room. And when Mary does speak it, softly, almost to herself, she tastes the fear in the air. Fear that has nothing to do with God and everything to do with power. The years press on, and Catherine grows ill away from the center, alone in a quieter house, watched, restricted, still holding her dignity, still insisting she is the true queen, still refusing to surrender her identity to a narrative written by men. In 1536, Catherine dies, and Mary is not allowed to attend the funeral, not allowed to stand near the body, not allowed to touch the hand that once guided her through childhood corridors, not allowed even the ordinary human ritual of goodbye. That kind of denial leaves a mark deeper than bruises. It teaches the heart that love can be taken without warning. And it teaches the mind that the world will call that taking lawful. Mary keeps breathing. She keeps walking through hallways. She keeps kneeling in chapels. But something inside her seals itself, like wax cooling. The grief hardens into identity, and identity wraps itself around faith, because faith is the one thing her father cannot fully confiscate. If you were here with me, you would hear the way her prayer becomes more than devotion. It becomes a bridge back to her mother. It becomes a way to hold Catherine close without permission. Each whispered phrase, a quiet act of refusal. This is the root of the later story. Not the flames, not the warrants, but a girl trained to obey who is suddenly told she does not belong. A girl who learns that love can be punished, and who carries that lesson forward like a hidden ember. The candle beside us shortens. The room stays gentle, and in that gentleness, you can feel how a wounded devotion can grow rigid, how it can become the kind of certainty that refuses to bend, because bending once meant breaking. And as Mary moves through these years, quiet on the outside, storming within, time keeps turning its heavy wheel, bringing her toward the day when she will step into London as queen, and the old locked door inside her will finally open, not into freedom, but into something darker, something she will call duty. After the declaration, Mary is moved like an object, not harshly, but firmly, guided by rules that do not care about tears. New attendants, new rooms, new instructions on what she may call herself. Even her signature becomes a battlefield, each letter a small surrender or a small act of resistance. There are days when she is told to attend services that do not feel like her own, and she sits with her back straight on a hard bench, the wood smooth from use, the air smelling of bodies and candle smoke, and she listens to sermons that speak as if the old faith is a stain to be scrubbed away. She keeps her face calm. Inside, She repeats the prayers she learned at her mother's side. Quiet words, shaped with care, held close where no one can confiscate them. Sometimes a messenger arrives with news from her mother, never directly, always filtered, always delayed. A report of health, a report of restrictions, a report of another door closed. Mary reads the words and feels the strange ache of gratitude mixed with rage, because even scraps of connection are precious, and the need for them is humiliating. She begins to understand the mechanics of isolation. It is not one big act. It is many small acts. A letter intercepted. A visitor refused. A servant reassigned. A path through the palace suddenly forbidden. Each small denial teaches the body to hold tension. Jaw clenched. Breath shallow. Hands folded too tightly. And yet, she also learns a different skill. Endurance. The kind of endurance that looks like stillness from the outside. She wakes. She washes her face with cold water. She dresses. She walks. She kneels. She eats what is said before her. She answers when spoken to. She says very little. Each day becomes a bead on a string, slid through the fingers of time. If you were here, you might notice the way she watches people. Mary studies the court the way a person studies weather, looking for signs. A shift in tone, a pause before a name, the way eyes flick toward a door before someone speaks. She is learning who is safe. She is learning who is hungry. She is learning who will turn their coat when the wind turns. She learns that even servants are caught in this machinery. A maid might offer a gentle touch, then be replaced the next week because gentleness is suspicious. A priest might speak kindly, then vanish, moved elsewhere. Silence becomes the safest language. Catherine of Aragon remains alive in Mary's mind with more clarity than the faces around her. Mary remembers her mother's hands, slightly rough from devotion and work. Not the hands of someone who has never done anything, but hands that have held fabric, held prayer books, held the weight of responsibility. She remembers the scent of her mother's clothing, clean wool, a faint trace of rose water, and candle smoke that clings after long hours in chapels. When Catherine is kept away, Mary starts to keep small rituals, folding cloth a certain way, touching a rosary before sleep, facing a particular direction when she prays. These are tiny acts, but they are acts that say, I still belong to something. I still remember who I am. The court around Henry grows more brittle. The rules of faith change. The rules of loyalty change. Old friends fall. New favorites rise. Names are lifted, then removed, as if people are pieces on a board. Mary watches it all and stores it, not yet as revenge, but as a lesson. If you are powerless, you must remember everything. Memory becomes a secret archive. When Catherine dies, the news arrives like a blunt weight, delivered in careful language that tries to make it sound ordinary. Mary does not scream. She does not faint. She sits very still. The room seems to widen, as if air has been removed and replaced with emptiness. Her breath becomes shallow. Her fingers go numb. Someone speaks, and the words sound far away. Later, when she is alone, the grief comes in small waves. Not dramatic, not theatrical. It comes as a heaviness in the chest. It comes as a sudden memory of a voice. It comes as a thought that repeats. I did not get to say goodbye. That thought is a stone. She carries it. This is the place where love hardens into devotion. Devotion hardens into certainty, and certainty begins to look for an outlet. Not because Mary is born cruel, but because she has learned that the world responds to power, and the world has shown her what it does to those who kneel too long. Years later, people will speak of her as if she appeared suddenly, a queen with fire in her hands. They will forget the long corridor of years that led there, the quiet rooms, the watched letters, the closed doors, the nights of listening to timber settle and wondering if a mother's breath is still moving somewhere far away. So as you rest with me by this gentle fire, let the story move slowly. Let it take its time, because Mary's transformation is not a single turn. It is many turns, 1,000 small bends in the same direction, toward duty, toward control, toward a love that believes it must correct the world, even if correction means making the world afraid. After Catherine is gone, Mary notices how quickly people adjust. Mourning is allowed, but only in the approved shape. The court has rules for sorrow: black cloth, lowered eyes, certain prayers, but not too many, not too intense, not the kind of grief that makes others uncomfortable. Mary learns that even pain must be managed for the comfort of the powerful. She is urged to submit, urged to accept new titles, urged to sign papers that would confirm the story Henry once told. Each request is presented as reasonable, as if giving up truth is simply good manners. Mary resists when she can. When she cannot, she gives small concessions and then retreats into her own inner chapel, where her mother still lives, where the old faith still sings. Sometimes she walks in a garden, cold air on her cheeks, box hedges trimmed into strict shapes, paths of gravel that crunch underfoot, and she thinks about how even plants are forced into patterns here. The garden is beautiful, but it is also controlled. It is a lesson. Everything can be shaped. Everything can be cut back. Everything can be made to fit a design. She watches birds hop between branches, free in a way she is not, and she feels a sharp envy, then a strange calm, because envy burns energy, and she is learning to conserve energy. She is learning to wait. Waiting becomes her skill. Waiting in a chair while men decide her status. Waiting in a corridor while a door stays closed. Waiting for news that might never come. Waiting for the world to turn again. This long waiting does not make her gentle. It makes her focused. It sharpens her memory. It makes her devotion feel like the only stable ground. And when the day finally comes that she is offered something like restoration, a path back toward legitimacy, the path will be lined with conditions, and she will remember every condition she was forced to swallow. This is how a future queen is shaped in silence, not with a sword, not with a battle, with documents, with distance, with the slow drying of tears that no one is allowed to see. So let your own breathing stay slow. Let the fire keep its steady glow, and let Mary's years of waiting gather around the story like dusk gathering around a tower, because soon the tower will open, the city will cheer, and the woman who spent years being denied will at last hold the pen that signs other people's fates. In time, the long waiting ends, not because the court suddenly grows kind, but because the wheel of power turns the way it always turns, grinding down one set of names and lifting another. Mary is no longer a girl moving quietly through corridors. She is a woman who has learned to keep her face steady, even when her heart feels like it is carrying stones. The year is 1553. England is tired. The air feels full of old arguments, churches changing, rules changing, families splitting, neighbors watching neighbors. When the news spreads that Mary will take the throne, something in the streets loosens. People step out of doorways. They lean toward one another. They repeat the same words. Mary is queen now, as if saying it enough times will make it safer. And then comes the day she enters London, not with the softness of a forgiven child, but with the weight of a ruler who knows what was taken from her. The city receives her with noise that rolls like surf. Banners lift and dip. Bells answer other bells. You can almost feel the vibration through stone, through the soles of boots, through the hooves of horses that shift and snort in the press of bodies. If you were standing beside me in that crowd, you would smell sweat and wet wool. You would smell old smoke from chimneys. You would hear the scrape of carts, the shuffle of feet, the low rumble of thousands of voices. And above it, you would see her, Mary, on horseback or in a carriage, her posture precise, her gaze forward, her hands still. She does not wave like a girl hungry for approval. She receives the cheering the way a chapel receives prayer, with solemn patience. People call her the underdog queen. They love the idea that someone rejected has returned. They love the shape of the story. They do not yet understand what that story will ask of them. Inside Mary there is a second crowd, quieter, made of memories. The corridor where she learned her mother's name was dangerous. The room where she held a letter and felt it burn in her hands. The long years when she learned that the world can declare you nothing and then punish you for refusing to become nothing. Faith is the rope she has held all this time. Catholic faith is not just belief for her. It is the last voice of her mother, the last proof that Catherine was real, the last place where Mary can kneel and feel she is not alone. So, when Mary looks at England now, she does not see a nation with many souls. She sees a wound. She sees a tearing away from the one thing that kept her alive. England has become Protestant. The Mass has been pushed into shadows. Priests have learned to speak with caution. People have learned to follow new words, new rituals, sometimes for conviction, sometimes for safety. Mary looks at those changes and feels something hard rise in her chest. Not hatred, not at first. It feels like duty. It feels like love that is afraid. Honestly, this is where the story turns chilling, because Mary does not see herself as cruel. She sees herself as merciful. She believes that truth is not a private comfort. It is a law that must be restored. She believes souls are at stake, and she believes the ruler is responsible for the souls of the realm. You know that feeling when you finally gain control over something that once hurt you, and you promise yourself you will never be powerless again. Mary has that feeling now. It wraps around her like a cloak. It warms and constricts at the same time. In the palace, candlelight still moves on walls, but now the candles burn for different reasons. Papers are signed. Councils gather. Men bow and wait for her decisions. The pen is placed in her hand and she feels the strange steadiness of it. The way ink obeys pressure. The way a signature becomes an event. She turns toward the old church. She brings back the Mass. She restores Catholic practice. She believes she is cleaning the house of England, sweeping out a corruption that entered while she was forced to watch from the side. And the people, many of them, at first, follow. Some from belief, some from fatigue, some from hope that stability will return. There is also politics, the heavy iron frame beneath all devotion. Mary needs allies. Europe watches. Rome watches. Spain watches. England is a small island, but it sits in the path of storms. So she chooses marriage. She chooses Philip of Spain, a match that is meant to secure the Catholic future. The wedding is a ceremony of silk and cold calculation. The fabric is rich. The jewels catch firelight. But under the richness there is a quiet fear, because people know a foreign prince brings foreign influence. They worry the island will be chained to another will. Mary believes the marriage will strengthen her purpose. She hopes for an heir. She imagines the tenderness of a child who will not be erased. She imagines a line of continuity that will protect the faith, protect her mother's memory, protect her own place in history. She feels signs in her body. She believes she is pregnant. The court believes it too. The rooms fill with whispers and plans for a birth. The nation holds its breath. But the months stretch. The signs fade. The cradle remains empty. The silence in that emptiness is a different kind of silence. A silence that tells her time is shorter than she wanted. A silence that brings the old fear back. The fear of being replaced. The fear of being undone. Around her, advisors speak of threats. They speak of heresy. They speak of rebellion. They speak of people refusing to return to the old faith. They speak as if refusal is a disease. And Mary listens. She listens with the ear of someone who has been refused. She listens and feels the old wound in her reopen. And in that reopened place, she finds something like resolve. Modern people might call it repetition, the mind returning to the pattern that formed it. Mary was rejected for her beliefs. Now she stands where she can reject others for theirs. She does not name it revenge. She names it correction. She names it salvation. In private, she prays. She kneels on hard boards. Her knees ache. Her hands press together until the fingers whiten. The candle smoke curls above her, and in the smoke, she imagines a kind of purity, a clean rising. She asks for guidance. She asks for strength. She asks to be used as an instrument of divine will. And as her prayers deepen, the machinery of punishment begins to turn. Slowly, at first, like a heavy wheel that has not moved in years. Then faster and faster, until the first names are selected, and the first warrants are prepared, and the city begins to learn that Mary's love can burn. On the morning of her coronation, the city wakes before sunrise. There is a chill that sits on rooftops like thin ash. In narrow streets, people light small fires and warm their hands above them. The smoke rises straight at first, then bends, as if even the air is listening. Inside the palace, servants move with practiced quiet. Linen brushes skin. Water is poured. Metal buckles are fastened. A ribbon is tied, then untied, then tied again, because everything must be perfect when the world is watching. Mary sits while they arrange her garments, and she feels the weight of each layer, not only cloth, but expectation, history, the old law that once called her illegitimate and now calls her sovereign. In the chapel there are candles, and the candles have that small, steady sound they make when they burn, a soft hiss that you only notice when you are close enough to hear it. Wax thickens at the base. Drops slide slowly, leaving pale trails. The air smells like warm tallow and stone that has held prayers for generations. When she kneels, the floor is cold through fabric. The cold climbs into her bones, but she does not move. She has learned endurance. She has learned that stillness can be a kind of power. Priests speak the ancient words. The choir lifts its voices, and the notes float above her like a veil. And when the crown is placed, it is heavier than she expects, pressing down in a way that feels almost intimate, like a hand resting on the top of her head. Afterward, there are feasts, speeches, forced smiles. Mary moves through them with careful grace. She listens to compliments. She receives petitions. She watches people who once avoided her now bowing low. At night, when the hall's quiet, she returns to a private room where the windows leak a thin draft. The candle flame trembles each time someone passes in the corridor outside. She sits alone with a small book of prayers. Her lips form words without sound. Her eyes linger on the ink. She tells herself that devotion will keep her steady. She tells herself that if she holds tightly enough to the old faith, the world will not take her mother from her again. But the world does not care what you hold. The world moves. It pushes. The council chambers smell of parchment and sealing wax. Men argue with careful faces, their voices low but sharp at the edges. They speak of laws that must be restored, of punishments that will deter, of the danger of leaving heresy uncorrected. Some are sincere, some are hungry for favor, and some simply want to survive the shift from one regime to another. Mary sits at the head and watches their mouths move. Their hands gesture. Their rings catch light. She hears them say the same kind of things her father's men once said about her mother, about order, about legitimacy, about the need to protect the realm from disorder. The language is similar, and that similarity is a quiet poison. It makes harshness sound like responsibility. When the marriage discussions begin, she is already exhausted. Messages arrive from abroad, each with a different tone. Spain offers strength. France watches with suspicion. Rome promises blessing. England murmurs with anxiety. Mary signs letters. She reads reports. She studies faces. Philip is not a villain in her mind. He is an alliance. He is a door that might lead to an heir. When she meets him, the room is formal, heavy with eyes. Philip bows. Mary answers. Their words are polite, measured, more treaty than romance. When they marry, England watches like someone watching a storm on the horizon. The vows are said. The rings change hands. Music plays. Yet Mary senses a thin seam of loneliness running through the ceremony. A loneliness that has followed her for years and will not be brushed away by silk. Later, in the weeks after, she waits for her body to give her certainty. She watches the calendar. She wakes and listens for signs within herself. Her hands rest on her abdomen, sometimes without thinking. The court notices. The whispers grow. At first, the possibility of pregnancy feels like a gentle lantern in a dark room. The thought of a child calms her. It gives her a future to build toward. She imagines teaching the child prayers. She imagines a small hand holding hers. She imagines a little face that will never be forbidden from seeing its mother. But then the lantern flickers. The months advance. The court physicians speak in careful phrases. Mary feels fatigue, nausea, heaviness. Then the sensations shift and thin out. Hope turns into vigilance, and vigilance turns into dread. In her bedchamber, the sheets smell of clean linen, but the air feels stale, as if too many people have been waiting there. Every day brings another visitor, another respectful bow, another look that tries to measure her body. She begins to feel like she is being watched by the entire realm, as if England itself has become a silent midwife. When the time comes and nothing happens, there is no single moment of announcement. There is simply a gradual understanding, like dawn fading back into night. The whispers change. The courtiers stop speaking of the coming heir and start speaking of contingencies. Mary hears the names of Elizabeth murmured in corners. She feels the old fear return, the fear of being replaced by a younger sister. The fear of her work being undone by someone who does not share her faith. She retreats deeper into prayer. She walks slowly through passages lined with tapestries. Her footsteps are soft. The torches hiss. The stone is cool under the thin soles of slippers. Sometimes she pauses by a window and looks out at the river, and the river moves in the dark like a long breath. It does not care who is queen. It keeps flowing. In the city, nights grow tense. People talk in taverns. People argue in whispers at kitchen tables. Someone is always watching for the next change. Mary can feel the pressure building, like a storm pressed into a bottle. And so she chooses a path that feels, to her, like the only way to hold the world still. If she cannot anchor England with an air, she will anchor it with law. If she cannot soothe a nation into unity, she will force unity through obedience. She is certain that pain now will prevent worse pain later. That is the story she tells herself as she reaches again for the pen. And the first warrants settle on the table like heavy stones, waiting to be lifted and set in motion. The first time a name is set before her, it does not look like a monster. It looks like a line of ink on paper. It looks like a clerk has done his work. It looks almost ordinary, and that is how terrible things begin. Not with thunder, but with routine. Mary sits at a table where candlelight gathers in small pools. The flame makes the ink shine. A servant stands a little behind her, quiet as a shadow. Somewhere in the palace, a door closes softly. Somewhere outside, the city breathes in its sleep. She reads the charge. Heresy, refusal to recant, stubbornness, contamination of others. The words are heavy, but they are also familiar, because she has heard them used to justify cruelty before, just aimed at different targets. She feels a flicker of uncertainty, then she presses it down. A queen cannot tremble, she tells herself. A queen must heal the realm. Her hand lifts the pen. The pen scratches. The signature forms. When she sets the pen down, she feels as if she has placed a stone into a river, and the river has accepted it without complaint. February of 1555 arrives with cold air and early dusk. In Smithfield, the ground is hard. The sky is the color of old metal. People gather because crowds gather the way water gathers, pulled by gravity, pulled by curiosity, pulled by the strange human need to witness what the law decides. The first victim is John Rogers, a translator of scripture. He is not a stranger in the abstract. He has a wife. He has children. He has a voice that has spoken in 2 rooms. The story says his family is there. In the crowd, small faces look up. A woman holds herself tight. There are hands that want to reach forward and cannot. Mary is not in that crowd, but she is present in another way because her will has traveled ahead of her. Her signature is a thread connecting palace to street, and the people begin to learn that this thread is strong. Mary believes she is offering mercy because mercy, in her mind, is the chance to recant. She thinks, if they turn back, they will live. She thinks, if they refuse, they choose their own fate. This is how she protects herself from the feeling that she is the one doing it. Sometimes she watches from a distance, from a window, or from a place where she can see without being seen too clearly. She tells herself she must witness that a ruler must not be sheltered from consequences. The smoke rises. The city smells different afterward. The air carries a bitter trace that clings to clothing. After each execution, she returns to prayer. She kneels for hours. She asks forgiveness. She asks that her hand be steady. She asks that the suffering of the condemned be transformed into salvation. Somehow, in some hidden ledger, only heaven can read. Contemporary observers say she cried. I can believe it. It is possible to weep and still continue. People do it all the time. Tears are not always a break. Sometimes they are only a way the body releases pressure so the mind can keep walking forward. The Venetian ambassador writes of a queen who looks tormented, yet convinced. Imagine that. A woman whose soul is full of ache, but who believes ache is proof of righteousness. She thinks, if this hurts, it must be true. She thinks, if I suffer while I do it, then I am not cruel. I am obedient. The machinery continues. More names. More warrants. The city begins to count. One, then another, then another. The numbers shrink and grow in strange ways. They shrink because each death removes a voice. They grow because each death becomes a story, carried outward, repeated, turned into a warning or a rallying cry. And the strange irony begins to unfold. The very thing Mary hopes will bring unity begins to create division that cannot be stitched closed. People speak of martyrs. People hold the memory of the burned like a coal in the palm. Painful, impossible to drop. The more Mary tries to erase Protestant belief, the more it hardens into identity. Somewhere inside her, perhaps she senses this backfiring, but she cannot stop. A queen who stops looks weak. A queen who changes course looks uncertain. And Mary has spent her whole life being told she is uncertain, illegitimate, unfit. She cannot bear to confirm that story. Then comes the name that cuts deepest. Thomas Cranmer, the man tied to the ruin of her parents' marriage, the man associated with the stroke of the pen that declared her a bastard. For Mary, this is not only theology. This is personal memory. This is the moment her childhood collapsed. When Cranmer is captured, Mary offers pardon. She offers it more than once. All he has to do is renounce his beliefs publicly. The offer is presented as mercy, but it is also a hunger. If Cranmer recants, it will feel as if the past has been repaired. It will feel as if her mother is vindicated at last. Cranmer is afraid. He signs a recantation. The ink dries. For a moment, Mary can breathe. For a moment, she can imagine the burning ending. Because if the most famous Protestant voice can turn back, maybe others will follow. But at the last moment, Cranmer changes his mind. He stands before the fire, and he does not flee. He does not plead. He pushes his right hand forward first. The hand that signed. The hand that authored the words Mary hates. Witnesses say he holds it there, as if he is trying to burn the past itself away. When the news reaches Mary, she weeps again. Not because she regrets the punishment, at least not in the way we might hope. She weeps because the spell does not work. The chance for repair slips away. The wound stays open. Outside the palace, the nickname forms. Bloody Mary. It is a phrase that spreads fast, because it is simple, and simple phrases survive. It takes her complex grief and devotion and folds them into two sharp words. Mary hears it. She cannot escape it. She is a queen, yet she is also still the girl who begged to see her mother. The insult strikes that girl. The queen does not show it. The girl feels it burn. Time tightens around her. Her health fades. Some say it is illness. Some say it is grief shaping the body. We cannot be sure, but we know she weakens. The seasons pass. The rooms grow quieter. The court looks toward the future, and the future looks like Elizabeth. Mary has no child. She has no heir. She has only her work, and the dawning knowledge that her work will be undone. In the final days, she writes letters. She begs her sister to preserve the old faith. The letters go unanswered. On November 17th, 1558, Mary dies at 42. The date is a clean number, but nothing inside her is clean. Her last thoughts drift toward her father. She hopes to see him again. She hopes he will forgive her. Even at the end, she is still trying to heal the first wound, still trying to earn the love that was taken from her. And when the breath leaves her, the palace does not become peaceful. It becomes a hinge. The door swings. Elizabeth rises. England turns. The burnings end. The stories remain. If you sit with this quietly, you can feel the true tragedy. Mary did not believe she was spreading terror. She believed she was rescuing souls. She believed she was acting out of love. Love for her mother. Love for God. Love for the unity she never had. Trauma shaped that love into something sharp. It turned devotion into destruction. And that is why her story still feels close. Even now, people hurt, and then they hurt others, believing it is justice, believing it is protection, believing it is necessary. Messages arrive, folded and sealed, each seal a little red wound. She breaks them carefully. She reads. Some letters beg for leniency. Some urge strength. Some speak in the language of Scripture, making every decision sound as if it is already written in heaven. Mary often returns to one thought, her mother, and the need to prove that her mother's faith was not erased. In the city, the burnings become known before they happen. The rumor moves ahead like a cold wind. People hear a name, and they know to avoid certain streets, or they know to go. Because sometimes fear makes people seek the very thing that frightens them, just to see if it is real. Smithfield is open ground, hard in winter, dusty in summer. A crowd gathers, afraid, curious, restless. The fire is lit, the air changes, smoke rises, and afterward the smell clings to wool and hair. Back in the palace, Mary hears reports, numbers, names, place. She keeps her face composed when courtiers speak. She thanks them. She dismisses them. Then, when she is alone, she presses her fingers to her temples as if she can press the pain back inside. Some evenings she walks a corridor that overlooks a courtyard. The stones under her feet are worn by generations. The torchlight makes the walls ripple with shadow. She stops at a window. She does not see the executions from here, but she can see smoke drifting in a direction she recognizes. A thin, dark thread against the low sky. She watches it and tells herself it is necessary, and her stomach knots anyway. In her prayer book, there are pages soft from use. The edges are darkened by fingers. She traces a line of text, not reading it so much as holding it, like a person holds a familiar tune. She asks for pardon again. She asks for a sign that she is doing the right thing. Silence answers, the kind of silence that can be interpreted any way a desperate heart wishes. The court begins to notice that the burnings are not calming the realm. They are sharpening it. Protestants who might have kept quiet now speak with more certainty. They gather in secret and repeat the names of the dead. They recite their last words. They teach their children to remember. This is the part Mary cannot accept. She believes fear will correct people, but fear can also bind people together. It can create families of belief that grow stronger in the dark. Each execution becomes a punishment in Mary's mind, and a story of endurance in the minds of those who oppose her. When Cranmer enters the story, the atmosphere in the palace shifts. The name is heavy with old legal ruin. It is heavy with a paper declaration that split her childhood. Mary does not sleep well. The bed feels narrow. The air feels thick. She rises and walks, feeling the cold floor through her skin, reminding herself she is still real, still present, still queen. The offer of pardon becomes almost tender, because it is offered again and again. She wants him to bow. She wants him to say the right words. She wants him to undo what he did, not only for England, but for the girl Mary once was. When he refuses at the end, she feels something collapse inside. Not because she loses a political battle, because she loses a personal one. The past cannot be edited. The signature cannot be pulled back into the pen. After Cranmer, the burnings feel less like purification and more like stubborn momentum. The wheel keeps turning because it has been set in motion. because stopping would mean admitting error, and Mary cannot admit error without feeling she is admitting her father was right to destroy her. Her health fades, and the palace begins to wait, quietly, carefully. When she writes to Elizabeth, the ink on the page looks thin, as if even the letters are tired. She asks for the faith to be preserved. She asks for the work to continue. She asks, in a way, to be remembered kindly. The lack of response is another kind of exile, quieter than the exile she knew as a girl, but still sharp. On the final day, the room is warm from fire, but Mary feels cold. She tries to hold the blanket closer. Her fingers tremble. Someone offers her a crucifix. She holds it. The metal is cool. The coolness steadies her for a moment. Her thoughts drift, not to kings and councils, to a small, private place inside, a corridor, a mother's voice, a father's face turning away, a locked door, a girl waiting outside that door. She carries that girl to the end. When she is gone, the court moves quickly, because courts always move quickly when death makes a space. People kneel for Elizabeth. People rewrite their faces. People speak new prayers. The city breathes out, as if it has been holding itself tight for years. Mary's story stays. It stays as warning, as legend, as nickname. Some people use it to prove a point about cruelty. Some people use it to prove a point about faith. Some people use it to prove that love can become sharp when it is never healed. And now, as we sit with the fire and the low light, let your breath remain easy. Let the past drift farther away, because the next corridor is opening. Joanna of Castile is waiting there, and her devotion will cling so tightly that even burial will feel like betrayal. In the years after Mary, the kingdom keeps moving, but in another place and another court, a different kind of darkness gathers, not the darkness of fire, but the darkness of grief that refuses to loosen its grip. Joanna of Castile is born into power, but power in her world is never soft. It is a language made of contracts, borders, names, heirs. Her parents, Isabella and Ferdinand, rule with a firmness that makes history feel like stone in their halls. Even laughter sounds measured, even affection is weighed against duty. Joanna grows with a mind that notices more than it should. She learns languages. She learns music. She learns how a room changes when a messenger enters, how a servant lowers their eyes. When they carry a secret, she is praised for her sharpness. But sharpness in a princess can become a threat, and she feels that quietly, the way you feel a draft in a corridor before you see the open window. When she is sent to Flanders to marry Philip of Burgundy, she is young enough that love still feels like a promise rather than a risk. The journey is long waves, slap the hull ropes, creak, salt air dries on skin in the evenings she watches, candlelight shiver in the cabin, and she tells herself that a new life is beginning. Then she sees him, Philip, bright in the way. Some people seem bright even in shadow. Court writers will call him handsome, and the word is simple, but the effect is complicated. Joanna feels something in her chest lift and lean forward as if her whole body has stepped toward him before. Her feet move her, voice softens. When she speaks to him, her hands become restless when he is near. Philip understands charm, the way a skilled rider understands a horse. He knows where to place pressure, where to loosen it. He knows that attention is a currency. He spends it carefully. Joanna spends herself. In the beginning, she mistakes hunger for devotion. She believes that loving him completely will make her safe. She learns his schedule, his habits, the foods he prefers. She listens for his footsteps in corridors. She waits at windows for his. Return the waiting becomes its own rhythm, like breathing. When he is unfaithful, which he is, she feels the floor tilt under her. She cannot understand how someone can hold her hand and then turn away from her, as if she is furniture. She tries to pull him back with anger, with tears, with pleading, with silence. None of it works for long. In the court, people watch. They always watch. Their whispers cling to curtains and travel under doors. Joanna feels those whispers like dust settling on her shoulders. The betrayal does not make her stop loving. It makes her love harder. As if love is a rope she can pull until the world obeys. The harder she pulls, the more the rope cuts into her palms. Then, in the year 1506, everything changes with a speed that feels unreal. Philip collapses, and within hours, he is gone. Official words say fever, but official words are often only the first layer in the stillness after his death. Other stories begin to breathe poison plot convenience. Joanna hears them, and they fill the empty spaces. She refuses to let the body go. At first, it is a simple refusal. Not yet, not now. She says it as if saying it can slow time. Her attendants shift uneasy. Priests speak of proper rites. Courtiers speak of public order. Joanna hears them all, as if from the bottom of water. The body is prepared, placed in a casket that gleams under torchlight. Gold catches light and throws it back too bright for the grief in the room. Joanna stands close. She touches the edge of the casket with her fingertips, not for ceremony, but to prove it is real. She begins to travel with him. The procession moves through Spain like a slow shadow. Wheels creak, hooves thud in mud, cloaks snap in wind. The nights are cold enough that breath becomes visible. Joanna insists on traveling at night. Night is a curtain. Night hides what pen daylight would reveal. Night makes the world feel quieter, kinder. Every few miles she orders a stop. Torches are planted in the ground. Their flames lean and straighten with the breeze. Guards stand with hands on hilts, watching darkness. Servants move toward the casket, and Joanna is there, always there, close, enough that the smell of wax and horse sweat mixes with the smell of earth. She asks for the casket to be opened. Those around her flinch, but they obey, because she is queen, because fear is stronger than disagreement. The lid is lifted. Cold air enters. Joanna looks down, and for a moment, the world becomes narrow. Her face softens, as if she is looking at a sleeping man. She speaks to him. She tells him small things, court, gossip thoughts she cannot carry. Alone, the sound of her voice is gentle, as if she is trying to keep him comfortable. The men around her swallow and look away. Some cannot bear the sight. Some cannot bear the smell. They step back into the night, breathing through cloth, staring at the horizon as if the horizon can save them. Joanna does not move away. She brushes hair that cannot be brushed. She arranges cloth that no longer warms in her mind. She is not doing something grotesque. She is proving that her love is stronger than decay, stronger than politics, stronger than the ordinary rule that says the dead must be placed under earth and forgotten. In the same weeks, she issues decrees. She discusses finances. She listens to petitions. Her mind is clear when it chooses to be. This is what makes people uneasy. It is easier to label someone mad when they are also incompetent. Joanna is not incompetent. Her father sees opportunity. Ferdinand has lived in the language of advantage his whole life. He watches the procession and he smiles behind his hand. If Joanna is declared unfit, he can rule. If her grief becomes proof, he can become regent without seeming cruel. So he feeds the story. He invites witnesses. He lets foreign diplomats hear the details. He allows the court to repeat the word madness until it sounds like certainty. Joanna becomes a rumor, as much as a person. When she finally reaches Granada and the burial becomes unavoidable, it happens like a forced exhale. The casket is lowered, stone closes, the chapel becomes still. Joanna stands in the quiet and feels a hollow open inside her, deeper than the parted grave. They lock her away at Tordesillas. The word imprisonment is not used. They call it protection. They call it care. The rooms are comfortable enough. There is food. There are attendants. There are prayers. But the windows are boundaries. The doors are watched. The corridors lead nowhere. Years begin to stack like layers of dust. In the mornings, she wakes to the sound of small movements, fabric footsteps. A bowl placed on a table light enters the room in thin angles. It touches her hands, then slides away. Sometimes, she sits by the window and watches the sky change color. Sometimes, she presses her forehead to cool glass and listens to the distant sounds of life continuing without her. She is called mad for decades. The label becomes a wall. It keeps her words from mattering. It keeps her protests from becoming political. Yet, she still writes. She still listens. She still remembers names. She still understands what is being done around her. Visitors come rarely. Each visit is an event that turns the room brighter for a moment. Joanna holds herself straight. She speaks with dignity. She asks questions that reveal she has been paying attention. At sunset, she looks toward the direction of Granada. The sky becomes a slow wash of color. Then, darkness. She whispers a simple phrase into the fading light. "Good night, my love." She says it like a ritual, like a bridge. She says it as if the words can carry her across distance, across stone, across time. 46 years pass. Outside her walls, rulers change, wars begin and end. Alliances shift inside her walls. The same chair remains in the same place. The same candle is lit in the evening. The same air carries the same faint smell of wax. Near the end, her grandson visits. The room is quiet, and the young man feels the weight of it. Joanna looks at him and sees a future she will not touch. She speaks softly. "I was never mad, child. I was in love." We cannot be sure exactly what was said. Stories bend when they pass from mouth to paper, and paper bends again when it passes into legend. But the idea remains. In a world that feared women, who felt too deeply love could be treated like illness. When Joanna dies, she dies as someone who has been held in place for so long that movement feels like a dream. Her last days are simple. She drinks water. She listens to prayers. She watches candlelight pool on the wall. She lets her breath slow. Her story remains not only as a warning about grief, but as a warning about politics. How easy it is to call someone unstable when their stability is inconvenient. How quickly a woman can be turned into a ghost while still breathing. Let this settle, and you can feel the cold of those locked rooms. and also the quiet, stubborn warmth of her devotion, a devotion that could not save her, but could not be erased either. And now, as the fire beside us lowers and the room grows softer, another story waits. A story of a woman who did not carry a coffin, but carried a mask carved of gold and stone and masculine titles, a mask worn for decades, so a kingdom could keep breathing. Honestly, when I picture that long night procession, I hear the small sounds first, not the drama, but the quiet work of bodies moving through cold air. Leather creaks where straps hold the casket in place. A lantern swings and its light slides. Across wet stones, the road smells of mud and crushed herbs and horse breath. There is always water somewhere, a ditch, a river, a puddle catching the moon like a dull coin. Joanna walks close enough that her sleeve sometimes brushes the wood her attendants try to keep pace. But grief has its own speed. It does not match anyone else. The night wind moves through the folds of her mourning cloth, and in that wind, you can almost imagine a different life, one where she is simply a woman walking beside someone she loves, instead of a queen dragging love behind her like a heavy wheel. Sometimes they camp near a chapel or a ruined wall, and the soldiers build a small fire. The flames are low because they do not want to be seen, and the smoke rises thin and pale. Joanna sits with her hands near the warmth and stares into it, as if she is trying to read a message in the coals. She does not speak much then, but her face is awake. Her eyes keep returning to the casket as if it might answer her. In those pauses, she remembers ordinary things. Philip laughing when the room was full of music. Philip turning his head to listen to a joke. Philip resting his hand on her shoulder for a moment that felt like sunlight. And then she remembers the other moments. The moment when he turned away, when he chose a stranger, and left her standing in the quiet of the hall. Those memories move through her like a slow tide, coming in and going out. If you were standing here with me by the fireplace, you would feel how strange it is to watch a heart try to build a house out of a person who is gone. That is what she is doing, night after night, building a shelter from loss. With the only 12 materials, she still has ritual memory, stubborn devotion. Even the act of opening the casket becomes a kind of prayer. Hands lift the lid. Carefully cloth rustles a torch, pops, and the tiny burst of sound feels too loud in the dark. Joanna leans forward and breathes as if she expects to hear the breath in return. She tells him the day has ended. She tells him the world is unfair. She tells him she will not abandon him. And for a moment, the night seems to hold still around her. But the people watching are learning something else. They are learning that a story can be shaped while it is still happening. And Ferdinand understands this better than anyone. He lets the tale spread because he knows the tale will travel faster than the wheels. He knows that by the time Joanna reaches the next town, the word madness will already be waiting there like a shadow under a door. In Tordesillas, the same lesson continues. A story can be a lock as strong as iron. A label can make a room smaller without moving the walls. The attendants speak in gentle voices, but their gentleness is a net the priests offer. Comfort, but their comfort is also supervision. Years pass and the window becomes her map. The light tells her seasons in summer. The air carries the smell of leaves in winter. The stone feels colder. The sky sometimes looks like metal. Rain moves in sheets. Water runs down the glass. And she watches each line slide and break and vanish. She whispers, "Good night, my love," not as a performance, but as a thread. She can hold one sentence she can repeat when everything else is taken. A thread that runs from her mouth to the dark horizon and back again. And as that thread tightens and loosens with each evening, the world outside keeps rearranging itself, the same way flames in a hearth rearrange the wood into ash. Slow, patient, deep time. One small life held in one room, and yet that life still contains a kingdom worth of memory. The next story begins far from Spanish stone. It begins where the air smells of river reeds and sun-warm dust. Egypt, a place where time feels older than any one name, where statues stare without blinking, where candlelight in a temple can make carved faces look almost alive. Hatshepsut enters this world as a royal woman in a system that prefers its power wrapped in a male shape. The throne is not just a chair. It is a myth. It is a promise made between earth and sky. The king is called Son of the Sun. The king is the living bridge. When Thutmose II dies, the court becomes a quiet storm. The heir, Thutmose III, is still a child, too young to hold the weight of the crown without being crushed by those who would use him. Hatshepsut is the widow and also the stepmother. At first, she does what the system expects. She becomes regent, a hand on the tiller, a voice in the council, a steady presence that tells the empire the river will keep running. But regency is a temporary word. In the palace, it tastes like a promise that others will try to break. Hatshepsut looks around and sees the sharks under the surface. Priests, generals, officials who smile with their mouths while their eyes count possibilities. A child king is easy to replace. An accident can happen. A favor, a fall, a quiet disappearance in a corridor. In that kind of world, compassion can become a weakness. So she makes a decision that sounds impossible. She decides to become pharaoh. Not in secret. Not with a whispered coup. She does it in daylight. She does it with stone and language. She does it by changing what people see and what people are allowed to say. She straps on the symbols of kingship, the false beard, the kilt, the posture of the statue. She orders artists to carve her with broad shoulders and a firm jaw. She orders scribes to write her titles in masculine form. King, good God, Son of the Sun. The words are carved so deeply that wind cannot erase them. I have always found it strange how much a civilization can accept when it is written in stone. You can tell people a woman cannot rule. Then you can show them a woman ruling well. And little by little the rule changes without anyone admitting it. So she repeats herself in the public world. On walls, on statues, on seals. She makes herself visible everywhere so that absence will feel wrong. She commissions hundreds of likenesses. Some show her as fully male. Some show her in a softer in-between form. It is as if the empire is being taught gradually. It is as if she is letting the nation practice seeing her. On ceremonial mornings, Hatshepsut rises before dawn. The air is cool. Stone is cold under bare feet. An attendant brings water. Another brings cloth. Another brings the beard. The ritual is slow. Cloth wrapped, collarset, symbols placed in the right order. Each step feels like a lock turning. When she steps into the first light, she is already the pharaoh. The woman inside the cloth is private. The king in the gold is public. And still, she is not only performing, she is working. She listens to reports, grain stores, canal repairs, temple offerings, messages from border forts. The empire is a machine and each part must keep moving. She asks practical questions. She expects precise answers. In those moments, the mask is not an act. It is a tool, a way to get things done in a world that refuses to hear a woman unless she speaks through a male title. This is how she keeps the mask in place. Success. People accept what works. But the cost is not nothing. A long reign is a long tension. The boy king in the background becomes a constant shadow. In council meetings, his eyes learn. In training yards, his muscles harden. He grows used to being second. Second can become bitterness. Hatshepsut tries to shape the transition. She begins to share power, not stepping down, but making space. Two suns in one sky. It is awkward. It is delicate. It is political breathing. Inhale. Exhale. Try not to panic. Then she is gone. Afterward, the erasure feels like a second death. The chisels are small. The work is careful. A name is removed, stroke by stroke. Dust falls. The carved line becomes flat. The past is made smooth so it can be walked over. It is debated how much Thutmose III drove this. Some scholars argue he waited years before beginning the defacement. Others suggest the campaign was systematic and deliberate. We cannot be sure. The stones do not sign their orders, but the effect is clear. Someone wanted the story to become simple again. Male pharaoh, Malalion, clean succession, a world that does not need to explain a woman with a beard. There is a soft lesson in that. Sometimes survival is not only staying alive. Sometimes it is leaving enough traces that the future can find you again. As this thought settles, the world shifts once more. The river breath of the Nile fades into another kind of water. The wet air of Britain. The smell of rain on grass. The creak of carts on a rough road. Here, the empire is Rome. Here, the crown is not a golden headdress, but a promise made to a tribe. The Iceni live under a tense peace. Their king, Prasutagus, tries to make a deal with the invaders. Half to Rome, half to his daughters. A paper shield. When he dies, the paper burns. Roman officials arrive like a cold wind. They speak of law. They speak of order. They take what they want. They refuse inheritance for women. They treat the royal house as if it is nothing. Boudica stands in that moment as a widow and a mother and a queen who has been told she is powerless. The humiliation that follows is recorded by Roman writers who did not need to exaggerate to make it horrible. Even they sound uneasy when they tell it. Boudica rises from the ground with a change in her eyes. The change is quiet at first, a kind of stillness. The stillness you see before a storm breaks. She begins to speak to other tribes. Her words travel faster than her feet. She turns personal pain into a shared warning. Today it is my house. Tomorrow it is yours. She does not need poetry. The truth is enough. People gather. Not only warriors, families, old ones, young ones, a whole world that has been pressed too hard and is ready to spring back. Britain is damp. The air tastes like rain. The sky is often low and gray. The land is green, but the green is dark. Water runs everywhere. In ruts, in roads, in ditches, in the breath of rivers. Rome brings straight lines to a place that prefers curves. Rome brings documents, taxes, debt, governors with polished armor. They build towns with stone and pride. They plant their standards like stakes in the earth. Prasutagus tries to keep his people safe with compromise. He writes a will. He thinks paper can protect daughters. He thinks tribute can soothe the empire. Then he dies. The moment he is in the ground, the officials come. Their boots are clean at first. Their hands are full of seals. They speak the language of law as if law is the same as justice. They announce that women do not inherit. They say it as if it is simple. They count property. They claim land. They take hostages. They call it order. Boudica watches them and feels the old world being peeled away. She is tall. She carries herself like someone used to being seen. Her hair is bright. Her eyes hold the kind of focus that makes even enemies hesitate. She has 2 daughters. She wants them safe. Rome makes that impossible. So the grief that begins here is not only personal, it is cultural. It is the feeling of your own language becoming dangerous to speak. It is the feeling of your gods being mocked. It is the feeling of your children being used as a message. In the days after the humiliation, she does not rush. She listens. She gathers. She walks through camps and speaks to faces lit by small fires. The smoke smells of damp wood. The ground is soft. Feet sink slightly into earth with each step. She tells the story that everyone already knows but has been afraid to say aloud. If they can do this to a queen, they can do it to you. The words move from mouth to mouth. Tribes that were enemies begin to sit in the same circle. Old grudges are put aside because a larger threat has entered the land. The unity is not perfect. It is desperate. Desperation can be strong. Before the march there is preparation. Spears checked. Shields rubbed with oil. Carts repaired. Food gathered. Children held close. The sounds are ordinary. A pot stirred. A strap tied. A baby fussing, then quieting. This is what makes the coming storm feel eerie. It grows from normal life. When they move, the movement is slow because there are so many. A river of bodies, a river of breath. The sky above them heavy with clouds. The roads narrow. Wheels bump over stones. Mud clings to ankles. Ahead, Camulodunum waits. It has temples that look like declarations. It has veterans who believe their walls are enough. It has merchants who think the empire will always protect them. Boudica draws nearer. And as she does, the sound of the army becomes like the sea. Not a single note. Many notes. Many footsteps. Many voices. Many small pieces of metal tapping together. Then there is the hush again. The moment when the wave lifts. The moment before it breaks. Hold on to the hush. Let it stay soft. Let your jaw loosen. Let your shoulders drop. The next part of the story will carry the fire of revolt and the cold mathematics of Roman response. But for now, we remain in the approach. In the breath before history turns. The city of Camulodunum waits like a bright tooth in the wet mouth of Britain. Stone walls. Straight streets. A temple that says Rome is forever. The people inside wake to routine sounds. A bucket lowered. Bread broken. A door bolt sliding back. They do not hear the full weight of the approaching tide yet. They feel it first as unease. Birds lifting from fields. Dogs whining without reason. A thin vibration in the ground that could be dismissed as distant thunder. Boudica comes closer, and the air changes. Smoke from campfires mixes with the smell of damp grass. Leather creaks on shoulders. Spears knock softly. Cartwheels complain in mud. A child coughs and then quiets. The army is so large that it stretches beyond the edge of sight. It is not a line. It is a living mass. Families and warriors. Old hands and young hands. Faces painted. Eyes fixed. There is a moment before the first surge when Boudica stands still. Her hair is braided and heavy. Her cloak is dark with moisture. She looks at the walls, and she does not speak like a poet. She speaks like a woman who has been forced to learn the language of force. She points to the temple. She points to the houses. She points to the ground under their feet. She reminds them of what was taken. She reminds them of what can still be taken back. The crowd answers her not with refined words, but with sound. A low roar that rolls across the field and rises into the gray sky. The attack does not begin like a careful siege. It begins like water breaking through a weak bank. The first bodies rush forward, then more, then the whole wave. Roman defenders lift shields. They shout commands. They try to hold a line. But the line is thin, and the wave is thick. The walls that look strong in daylight feel suddenly too small to protect a whole town. Within hours, the streets are chaos. Smoke rises. Wood cracks. Tiles fall. The smell of burning resin and wet wool and fear spreads through the lanes. In the middle of it, Boudica does not need to swing a weapon to be dangerous. Her danger is what she represents. A refusal, a mirror held up to Rome. The city that was meant to show domination becomes a warning. When it is done, Camulodunum is a wand, ash and broken stone, a silence that comes after shouting. The Romans who survive run. They carry the story with them. The story travels along roads and reaches Londinium like a chill. Londinium is younger. It is a busy knot of trade. The river smells of mud and salt. Ships creak at their moorings. Merchants count coins. Soldiers watch crowds. When the news arrives, the governor, Suetonius Paulinus, is returning from another campaign. He rides fast. His cloak snaps behind him. His mind moves faster than his horse. He thinks in numbers. He thinks in time. He thinks in what can be held and what must be released. He reaches Londinium, and he sees at once that he cannot save it. Not with the men he has. Not with the hours left. He stands in the streets and listens to the city breathing around him. He sees faces pleading. He hears prayers. He feels the weight of deciding who gets to live and who will be left behind. He orders the evacuation of those who can move. Soldiers, officials, some families that can keep pace. Many cannot. The old, the sick, the ones with no cart, the ones who have nowhere else to go. They remain as the column marches out. The sound of the departing boots is a harsh rhythm. It fades. It leaves behind a different rhythm. The waiting. The breath of people who know the wave is coming and cannot run. When Boudica arrives at Londinium, she finds a city that has been offered up. The streets are full of those left behind. Their eyes are wide. Their hands shake. The smell of sweat is sharp. Smoke begins again. It rises and flattens under the low sky. The river reflects firelight in broken lines. The destruction is complete enough that later hands will find a layer in the soil. A dark band. A burn mark across time. Then Verulamium. Another center. Another symbol. Another place where Rome has planted itself. It falls too. 3 cities. The story of it spreads like a stain. Numbers begin to be spoken. Tens of thousands. In a small world, those numbers feel like a second flood. A flood of loss. And yet, in the middle of this storm, something begins to shift. The rebellion is large and hungry. Families have joined. That makes it powerful and also heavy. Food must be found. Carts must be guarded. The wave that can crush a town becomes harder to steer across open land. Suetonius uses the time. He gathers his soldiers. He chooses ground. He chooses a place where forest covers the sides, where the front is narrow, where the enemy cannot wrap around. He places his men like a wall. Shields locked. Spears ready. The Roman line looks small against the coming mass. But the Roman line is trained to hold. It is built for holding. It is a machine of discipline. Boudica brings her people forward. The ground slopes. The air is cold. Breath shows white. The front of the British mass is wide, but the path is not. They must compress. They must squeeze into the place Suetonius has chosen. They begin to press forward anyway because rage does not like to wait. The first impact is terrible in its simplicity. Bodies meet shields. Wood hits metal. A wall of sound rises. For a time it seems the sheer force of numbers will break the line. But the Roman shields do not move much. They absorb. They lock. They push back in small steps. Behind them, disciplined hands throw javelins. Short, sharp flights. Then the Roman line advances. In the back of the British force, the carts have been placed like a ring. Families watching. A circle of wheels and wood. It is meant to be a home base. It becomes a trap. When the front collapses, there is nowhere to flow back into. The wave hits its own wall. The loss is immense. Later, Roman writers will boast about it. They will claim the numbers were far larger than they likely were. They will say 80,000. They will say more. We cannot be sure. We can be sure that the field became quiet in the end. Quiet in the way a storm leaves, a landscape changed. Boudica does not allow herself to be taken. She knows what Rome does with captured symbols. She knows cages. She knows parades. She knows humiliation. She chooses her own ending. Ancient sources say poison. The small thing. A cup. A swallow. A decision. The body falls. The story rises. Years later, Rome rebuilds. Roads are repaired. New stone is laid. The empire continues. Yet Boudica remains in the memory of the island like a buried ember. She is the reminder that a system can be stable and still be hated. She is the reminder that pain can unite enemies. She is also a warning about what happens when justice becomes only fire. As the embers of that revolt cool, we step into another England. Another year. Another young woman. The crown is still heavy, but the danger is different. Elizabeth inherits after Mary. The air in the palace feels sharp with uncertainty. She is unmarried. She is young. She is watched by every court in Europe. Elizabeth learns quickly that what others call weakness can be used as a lever. She does not rush to marry. She does not rush to prove herself with a man at her side. She keeps the question open. Suitors arrive as letters. Sealed wax. Heavy paper. The smell of ink. Each proposal is a thread she can pull. She answers with careful warmth. She lets each foreign ruler think there is a chance. She smiles. She delays. She keeps everyone slightly hopeful and slightly nervous. It is like holding many candles in a windy room. You shield one, then another, then another. You do not let any one flame become so large it burns the house. In her private rooms, she is tired. She has moments when she wishes for softness. A hand held without calculation. A life not lived under gaze. But she has seen what marriage can do to a queen. She has watched men claim ownership through vows. She chooses solitude as strategy. Her closeness with Robert Dudley becomes a rumor in corridors. Gifts exchanged. Long conversations. Glances caught and remembered by those who want evidence. Elizabeth does not give the world clarity. Clarity is a trap. She gives the world performance. A queen married to her realm. A ring. A ritual. Words spoken to Parliament. The identity becomes armor. When the Armada comes and the coast smells of salt and fear, Elizabeth rides among her troops. Her horse moves carefully on churned ground. Soldiers stand with damp clothes and cold hands. She speaks, and her voice carries. She tells them she has the body of a woman, but the heart of a king. The words become a spell. They steady people. They make fear feel like purpose. Storms break the Spanish fleet. English ships harry it. The sea becomes the ally that no treaty could guarantee. Elizabeth becomes larger in legend. The Virgin Queen. The idea is stronger than the person. The idea protects the person. Yet even legends feel loneliness. When Dudley dies, she shuts herself away. 3 days. The sound of footsteps outside her door. The light dim. A letter kept like a relic. Power wins again. The heart pays. Across the world, another woman learns a harsher lesson. Wu Zetian enters the Tang Palace as a girl. The palace is beautiful and lethal. Silken knives, gardens, and whispered accusations. Thousands of women ranked and measured. A glance can change your fate. A rumor can end it. Wu sees this system and does not pretend it is gentle. She learns quickly. She learns to watch. She learns to wait. When the old emperor dies, she should be sent away to a convent. She finds a way back. She attaches herself to the next emperor. She steps into the center. There is a child. A daughter. Sources say the child dies and the death becomes a weapon. It is debated. The records are old and written by those who hated her. Some scholars argue that the story was shaped to make her seem monstrous. Others believe something dark did happen. We cannot be sure. We can be sure that the result is power shifting. Empress Wang falls. Wu rises. Later, as the emperor grows ill, Wu governs. She signs documents. She listens to officials. She promotes talent. She builds networks. She punishes threats. She is ruthless, and she is competent. That is what makes her hard to place in one simple story. At last, she declares herself emperor. Not empress. Emperor. A word that should not belong to a woman. She forces it to belong. Her reign includes reforms, merit, opportunity. It also includes fear, a secret police, accusations, exile. The palace never becomes safe. It becomes efficient. In old age, she is forced to abdicate. The court pushes. The body weakens. In the end, she pardons many. Some say it was mercy. Some say it was calculation. Her tombstone bears no inscription, a blank surface, a final, quiet act. From the Tongue Court, the story turns to France, where Catherine de' Medici enters as an outsider. Italian, mocked, watched. She learns that being underestimated is a kind of cover. She builds an image around herself. Astrologers, strange objects, symbols. She does not need real magic to benefit from fear. In a world where superstition is strong, a whisper can do the work of an army. She consults men like Nostradamus. She fills her rooms with charts. People see what they expect. They begin to believe she can curse. They arrive at negotiations already shaken. Catherine uses this. She also uses spies, networks, letters. She survives wars of religion by being more patient than the men who want quick victory. Her reputation becomes darker than her actions. She is blamed for massacre. Some blame is likely political. Some is myth. Her real skill is staying in the center while the kingdom tears itself. She keeps the monarchy alive. When she dies, the story that survives is witch, not strategist. It is easier for a later age to accept an evil sorceress than a brilliant woman who outplayed men. Let these lives rest together for a moment. 4 women, 4 different strategies. Fire, coffin, mask, a storm, letters, silence. Each of them a kind of survival, each of them paying a price. And as the fire beside us settles into a softer glow, we turn to another woman whose prison will become a writing desk. A queen of Scotland held in English castles. A queen who will try to move the world with ink and paper. The night around her will be long. The guards will be many. The keys will turn in locks. Yet inside the hush of stone corridors, she will keep hearing the distant sound of rivers and crowds and bells. She will keep feeling that the story is not finished. She will dip her pen. She will fold the page. She will trust that someone beyond the wall will read. And in that trust, the next part begins. Even here, with you and me, with the candle smoke and the slow breath, you can sense how a single sheet of paper can carry the weight of a crown. How soft fibers can become a bridge. How a name written carefully can feel like a doorway. So let the images of burned cities fade now. Let the sea and the temples and the palaces settle into quiet. Let the pen scratch become the loudest sound. We drift onward. A castle at night has its own language. Stone sweats. A draft slides under doors like a careful animal. Somewhere, a guard clears his throat. Somewhere a keyring clinks once and then goes still. Mary of Scotland sits with a candle near her elbow. The flame wavers when she breathes. She watches melted wax gather and harden. She feels time collecting the same way. She has been called a guest. She knows she is a prisoner. The room has comforts. A bed with thick curtains. A chair. A table. But comfort can be another kind of chain. Every visitor is observed. Every word is repeated to someone else. Every letter is a possible knife. Mary does not stop writing. She writes because writing is movement. Writing crosses borders that bodies cannot. She writes to foreign courts. She writes to Catholic allies. She writes to those who might help her escape. She writes with code. She writes with careful phrases that can mean two things at once. She learns to make her hope look like diplomacy. In these pages, she becomes more than a woman held behind walls. She becomes a symbol. A Catholic queen denied her place. A rival claim to the English throne. A name that can gather people who want change. Some of them want her for devotion. Some of them want her for opportunity. Some want her because they hate Elizabeth. Mary accepts their attention because attention is power. Power is air. Years pass like slow rain. Castles change. Guards change. Her hair changes. The candlelight touches her face differently. She is still waiting. Waiting is its own kind of work. It shapes the mind. It can make imagination grow sharp. It can also make imagination turn inward and feed on itself. Some scholars argue that long captivity altered her judgment. Others see a mind that stayed clear and simply became bolder. We cannot be sure. We can feel the tension in what survives. Then comes the young man Babington. A name carried in whispers. A network of supporters. A plan that feels like a door finally opening. Letters move in secret. They are hidden in barrels. They are rolled into bundles. They are passed hand to hand in kitchens and stables. Each hand that touches them becomes part of the risk. Mary answers. That is the turning. Her reply includes the idea of removing Elizabeth. It includes approval. It includes the sense that after preparations, the act will follow. She may have believed her mail was safe. She may have believed she was finally surrounded by loyal hands. She was not. Francis Walsingham has been listening for years. His spies are patient. They take ink and paper and turn them into a net. They do not stop the plot early. They let it swell. They let names surface. They let the web become visible. When they move with the weight of proof. Mary is put on trial. The room is formal. The air is cold. She stands with dignity. She refuses to accept that a court can judge an anointed queen. She speaks with intelligence that unsettles her enemies. Yet, the letters are there. Her own words. A trap that is also a mirror. Execution becomes inevitable. Mary understands this. She decides to control the shape of the ending. On the day she dresses carefully. Black on the outside. Red beneath. A color of martyrdom in Catholic imagination. She prays. She forgives. She meets the gaze of those present with a calm that makes the room feel smaller. The blade falls. The story rises. Across Europe, the death becomes fuel. Mary becomes an image. A martyr queen. A woman who wrote herself into immortality. As her candle goes out in that last room, another candle is lit in Rome. Another palace. Another mother. Agrippina the Younger knows the shape of power in her bones. In Rome, power is close, and it is lethal. She marries her uncle, the Emperor Claudius. She brings her son Nero into the center. She teaches him the art of smiling while planning. There is a rightful heir Britannicus. Agrippina moves him aside with subtle hands. Gifts, threats, appointments, isolation. Her goal is simple. Nero must be emperor. She prepares the ground. When Claudius begins to drift back toward his own bloodline, she chooses a darker path. Sources say poison, mushrooms, a slow illness, a death that looks natural enough to pass in a court where death is common. Nero becomes emperor at 16. At first, he is a boy wearing a giant robe. Agrippina stands beside him. Her signature appears on documents. Her presence shapes decisions. She believes she has built a tool that will keep her safe. But children learn. Nero has watched her methods. He has learned the lesson that threats must be removed. He begins to resent her control. He falls in love with someone Agrippina cannot command. The conflict grows. Agrippina threatens to reveal secrets. Nero feels the ground shaking under his feet. He tries to kill her with a collapsing boat. She survives. She swims through dark water, her breath harsh, her hands cold. She makes it to shore. This survival becomes a humiliation for him. He tries poison. She has protected herself with antidotes. At last, he sends soldiers. The order is simple. End here. Agrippina sees them and understands. Her last gesture points back to the womb that bore him. Strike here. The words, as recorded, may be shaped by storytellers. The idea is clear enough. The monster is her child and her creation. Rome continues. Nero rolls. The empire shakes. The lesson sinks deep. If you teach someone that love is calculation, they will calculate you away. From Rome, we step to England again. To a girl who became a queen and then a wolf in the stories of men. Isabella of France is married young to Edward. She enters a court where favorites rule, and the king seems distant. She is mocked. She is controlled. Her servants are replaced. Her letters watched. Her children used as leverage. She begins to keep records, quiet notes, a file of grievances. When she is sent to France on diplomacy, she chooses not to return. She chooses rebellion. She takes a lover, Mortimer. She gathers an army. It is small, but the kingdom is tired of Edward. Nobles join her as if they have been waiting for someone to say enough. Edward is captured. Parliament deposes him. Her son is crowned. Isabella and Mortimer become regents. The rumor of Edward's death becomes a shadow story. A brutal method. A red-hot poker. Many historians debate the truth. The image persists because it is horrifying and symbolic. Whether literal or not, it tells us what people wanted the story to mean. Isabella rules for a few years. She takes wealth. She takes power. Then her son grows. Edward III moves against Mortimer. Mortimer is executed. Isabella begs for mercy. Her son does not grant it. He does not kill her. He cages her in comfort. A return to the old state. A woman dependent on male goodwill. She lives long in that quiet punishment. She dies wearing her wedding dress, a gesture that feels like a knot that never untied. Then we travel further back to Eleanor of Aquitaine, a woman with land like an empire. She marries the King of France. Their marriage is cold. She joins a crusade. Rumors follow. She divorces. She remarries quickly to Henry of England. The map of Europe shifts under the weight of her choice. Eleanor treats marriage like a treaty, children like pieces, and heirs like leverage. She supports rebellions. She is imprisoned by her husband for years. Even in captivity, she remains useful. When Henry dies, she returns to power with sharp clarity. She rides across cold roads in old age. She negotiates ransoms. She arranges marriages. She moves like a hand behind a curtain shaping the stage. Her brilliance is undeniable. So is the loneliness that gathers when every relationship is also strategy. In the end, she chooses to be buried near the husband she fought. Perhaps it was forgiveness. Perhaps it was acknowledgement. Perhaps it was simply where the story wanted to close. Then the world tilts into revolution. Marie Antoinette arrives in France as a young Austrian princess. At first, the people cheer. She smiles at balconies. She tries to learn the shape of a new life. Yet the court is a theater that devours innocence. She spends. She plays. She seeks comfort in small, private spaces. She becomes a target. Pamphlets spread. The words are cruel. They turn her into a monster. They say she is foreign. They say she is corrupt. They say she is starving the people by indifference. A phrase appears. Let them eat cake. She likely never spoke it. It does not matter. The public needs a symbol. The symbol is her. When the state collapses and hunger rises, the story hardens. Her identity becomes fiction written by crowds. She cannot argue with it. Every act is reinterpreted. Charity becomes performance. Silence becomes guilt. She tries to protect her children. She writes letters. She plans escape. The flight fails. She is captured. She is tried. The trial is theater. Accusations pile. Even then, she holds dignity. In her final moments, she apologizes for stepping on a foot. A small, polite reflex at the edge of death. The contrast is haunting, a demon in the public imagination, a careful human in the real body. And then we reach Cleopatra, last queen of Egypt. not the cartoon of beauty, but a mind trained in languages and numbers. She inherits a kingdom tied to Rome by debt. She studies Roman politics like a scholar studying a difficult text. She meets Caesar not as a seductress, but as a negotiator. She offers money and stability and the promise of the East. With Antony, she stages spectacle. Purple sails, a golden bark, yet under the perfume and music there is calculation. She is building a vision where Alexandria matters as much as Rome. For a time, it almost works. The world splits. Then Actium comes. Sea wind. Oars. Chaos. The loss is decisive. Cleopatra understands what defeat will mean in Roman hands. A parade. A cage. A public humiliation. She chooses a different ending. She turns death into story. A love story. A tragedy that poets will repeat. She makes herself unforgettable. Augustus wins the war. Cleopatra wins the memory. Stay with the gentle rhythm for a little longer. Notice how your own heartbeat keeps time better than any historian. It is steady. It has no opinion about queens or empires. It only remembers what bodies have always done. Endure. Repair. Continue. If you were standing here with me, you might hear the smallest sounds that never make it into chronicles. A sleeve brushing wood. A page turning. A distant cart on a road. The soft hiss of a candle when it meets a draft. Those small sounds are the true archive. They are what life feels like while history is being made. And when you think of those women, try to picture them not as statues, but as people in rooms. Mary warming her hands over a small flame. Elizabeth pausing before a mirror and practicing a smile that must look effortless. Wu listening to footsteps in a corridor and knowing which courtier is coming by the cadence alone. Catherine choosing a ring for a meeting and feeling the pleasure of fear working for her. Boudica hearing grass bend under thousands of feet and tasting smoke in her mouth. Cleopatra leaning over a map, eyes narrowed, thinking in tides. It can be calming to remember that even the most frightening decisions were made in ordinary light. Lamps, tears, winter mornings. The world was never made of legend. It was made of rooms, and the rooms were filled with dust. Clay, water, candlelight, deep time moving quietly through everything. So when your mind reaches for the sharp edges, let it also reach for the soft ones. The cloth of a sleeve, the coolness of stone, the slow exhale, the idea that every story ends not with a shout but with silence. A silence that is not empty. A silence that is full of rest. Now, the fire beside us is low. The room is quieter. You can feel how these stories form a chain. Women in crisis. Crowns as burdens. Love as weapon. Faith as fire. Grief as prison. Strategy as loneliness. Each life a lesson and a warning. If you listen closely, you can hear a pattern. When systems tighten around a person, that person either breaks or changes the shape of the system. Sometimes the change is gentle. Sometimes it is violent. Sometimes it is only in narrative. Yet narrative can outlast stone. So as you rest here, let the faces drift away like smoke. Mary in her candlelit room. Agrippina in cold water. Isabella on a foreign shore. Eleanor on a winter road. Marie in a small cell. Cleopatra arranging her final scene. Let them become shadows that do not frighten you. Shadows that only remind you how human survival can be. And if any single thought remains, let it be this. Power is never just a crown. It is a story that people agree to tell. When the agreement ends, the crown becomes only metal. Yet the story can remain. A whisper in libraries. A line in a letter. A name on a statue. A rumor carried by wind. The night can hold all of it. The night can soften even the darkest edges. So breathe slowly. Let your jaw loosen. Let the room fade. Let the fire turn to a steady warmth. Good night.